Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Welcome to this week's Momentum. So good to have you tuning in. Thank you for doing that and spending some time with us here at Momentum. Really appreciate you doing that. Hey, don't forget to check out our website, momentumaustralia.org. There you'll find a bunch of stuff on there about who we are, what we're doing, what we hope to achieve, how we can help you on your journey. And of course, you can reach out to us as well. We'd love to hear from you, whether that's you need some help or some guidance in an area, or you're trying to find a men's group or something locally, reach out to us at momentumaustralia.org. And of course, if you'd like to financially support us as well, just quickly, that would be fantastic. We don't get a lot of support from around the country. So if you've been blessed and benefited from the stuff that we talk about and you'd like to throw some dollars our way just as a way of a thank you and a nod, we would really appreciate that. Thank you very much. momentumaustralia.org. As always, it's Des and Tim. And Des, how are you this week, my friend? Are you well?
Yes, I'm good. Really, really good. Yeah, and it's amazing we get to do this. We've done, I can't remember the number now, but it's like quickly approaching 200 shows. So it's absolutely unbelievable on all sorts of subjects. It's been really crazy. What a great journey to be able to sow into the lives of men. It's just such an honor to be able to do it. But guys, don't do life on your own. You know, one of the things that we say always in Momentum is we're all on a journey, and you may have people around you, but you don't have anybody you can have a safe and confidential conversation with. So can I encourage you to reach out to 1-800-000-MEN. That's 1-800-000-636 with the Momentum Care Line. It's available 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. 1-800-000-MEN. And also, as you probably all know now, we have our YouTube channel, Momentum for Men, so you can see Tim in all his glory, as well as hear him. So it's
just really, me.
So it's really good, yeah.
Yeah, we blank out the face of Des. It's just not worth seeing.
It's a wise decision.
Hey, look, in all fairness, Des, what you mentioned there about the care line, really appropriate potentially for this week's topic as well, because this is a massive topic for men, and one that we don't often talk about, particularly in church circles. It's a very personal thing, and one that we may feel very ashamed of at times, depending on what's happening in our life. It is fun. It makes us feel good. It can be good for the population, but it's also a tricky subject. We're talking about sex on this week's show.
What was its intended purpose, and why is it so powerful, and why are men and women wired so differently in the area of intimacy?
Yeah, we're going to get really, really honest. So heads up before we get into the show. It might get a little squirmy for all of us, actually, but we're going to go there with our guest speaker, author, and just legend, Brian Andrew, once again joins us. Great to be chatting with you again, Brian.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, gentlemen. It's an honor. And the topic as well is just something so relevant to all of us, really. So thanks so much.
Now, you've got a big claim on your website, which incidentally, livehappytogether.com.au is the website with your man book. And I think your man book claims that you can have the best sex of your life. I'm not sure what you've got in that chapter of the book, Brian. We'll need to read it. I've just sparked many men's curiosity. Expect the sales of the man book to go up in the next few days.
Yeah, that was my son and son-in-law, a couple of the young guys, when I was just putting the final touches to the book. And I had the man book will help you enjoy the best sex you ever had. I had it down a little bit in the list of the Garen. No, put it at the top. Put it at the top. Yeah. We want to have the best sex we've ever had. Look, I am an expert because I've been married for almost 48 years. I was asked to do a seminar, Moira and I, on sex. They couldn't find anyone else, apparently. I said, why don't you get someone younger? And they said, no, you've got a reputation in this area. What I of being able to speak about it without embarrassment.
Oh, I see. Right. Yes. Okay.
What I did was I actually worked out roughly how many times Moira and I had sex over the 44 years or whatever it was. So I said, well, I was introduced as an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. But I reckon I've had full-on sex, how many thousand times it was. Well, after they nearly picked themselves up off the floor laughing, I would also add to your comments, Tim, that I've discovered over decades that there's several topics you really must have humour because there's so much pain.
Yeah.
And things like finance, prayer, some of the other ones, sharing your faith, but definitely sex. So I don't know a single joke, unlike probably Irishman Dares. He probably knows hundreds of jokes, but somehow when I speak about this topic, there's a lot of laughter. And that's not an accident on my part. I never, ever cross the line to crude or rude or anything like that, but just reality.
Yeah.
And sex, Des, you said before, what is the purpose of sex? I think previous generations, it was a fairly monotone, it's for procreation, for getting pregnant and having a baby. But for Moira and I, that was almost the prevalent mindset. But then there was hardly any books on sex or anything like that around 48 years ago. But then I discovered over time that, hey, it's also for recreation. We were designed, man and woman, designed to enjoy sex, not just endure it. And it shouldn't be a chore. There should be laughter. There should be, you have fun around it. And so I've actually owned hundreds of books on relationships over the years. And even before I was a pastor, Moira and I wanted our marriage to be the best thing we did on the planet. Like, we want to do this well. So we were hungry. We went to seminars. We did everything we could to do marriage well. And certainly more and more books on sex came onto the market. And so we bought some of them as well. And any wisdom we have on this topic doesn't come from the Kama Sutra or some stupid television program or Netflix. Our primary wisdom comes from God's word. I was shocked to discover, for example, that the book, The Song of Solomon, that people think is some kind of high-level God loves you thing. It's actually very erotic.
Yes.
And it contains a lot of specific instruction on sex and the sexual experience. So Song of Solomon was one of my favorite books for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm experienced. I think Moira and I have done that well. It doesn't sound very modest, but I think good sex is also a reflection of the quality of a couple's relationship. And if you've got a good relationship, you've got clarity of common purpose, you've got the sense of being part of a team, you've got an emotional connection, you're likely to have good sex because that experience is just an expression of that healthy relationship.
But men and women are so different, Brian. And so, they have different needs, different mindsets in terms of going into intimacy. And on previous shows that we had you on, you talked about those things. Can you just refresh our minds about those?
This was an astonishing mystery to me when we got married. Like, I was ready for sex all the time. And when we got married, I thought, wow, sex on tap. This is going to be good. But I realized that wasn't necessarily Moira's mindset. And I found something that I jotted down. I don't know if I put it in that book or not, but when it comes to sex, we tend to be spotlight and the woman candlelight. We tend to be the football paddock and women tend to be symphony. We tend to be microwave and women tend to be oven. We're ready. We're good to go. And I remember as a young married man reading a book that diagrammatically represented a person, a male and female's readiness for sex in terms of arousal. And you can imagine in your mind, the male arousal basically is almost a vertical line. We're ready. We're good to go. We don't need anything, much at all. But the woman's is kind of an oscillating up and down, like I mentioned, the symphony. And I remember being a bit prayerful about that and wondering why. And I felt my understanding was that God created us differently, for men especially, not to approach sex selfishly. If we're good to go and we just want, to have relief or whatever, it's actually very selfish. And if we want, you can't have great sex if it's all about you. You just can't. And I think the whole area of serving one another in a marriage is fantastic and powerful. And I would apply that to the bedroom as well. So that, it's a serving thing. And another thing that mystified me was we might do a particular thing in our lovemaking. So what am I going to do the next day or two later? I'd do the same thing because it worked last time. And it's kind of pushed back. And I'm like, but you liked that the other day. No, I don't now. And I'm like, oh, gosh, that was a real mystery as well. But what I learned was humble myself. And just because something worked one week, it might not be what, it depends on a lot of things. So it's complex and simple at the same time. And I think it takes the desire to serve each other. Like, seriously, this might sound almost a bit kinky, but not kinky, but I used to pray at times that I would serve Moira sexually. And so my goal was, if you like, her orgasm or her pleasure. And honestly, when you take the focus off yourself and you seek to give your partner pleasure, you're actually setting yourself up for great sex. Because it's not just you. It's the two of us, and certainly for a woman, she's got to feel valued. She's got to feel that you value her as a person before she can respond. And of course, if you're at that young season of life where you've got young kids, then the most sexually stimulating or turn-on thing you can do is bath the kids and put their nappies or their PJs on, or vacuum the house. Or I've said to some guys, I learned that a woman's primary sexual organ is not what you think. It's actually between her ears. It's her brain. And she's got to feel valued and that you care about her. Because a woman is actually very powerful potentially sexually. And they're not by nature necessarily passive at all. I think some men think women are passive. Well, what if I hear men say that? I say, well, you haven't unlocked or shown the kindness and the grace and the understanding that she's a powerhouse of sexual energy. But it's not released if you don't serve her and seek her pleasure, if you know what I mean.
I see one of the things you did say in the previous show was that intimacy doesn't start when you go to the bedroom.
No.
Intimacy starts at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that phrase, yeah.
Let's take a short break. And I think on the other side of the break, let's step into the men's space particularly, because let's be honest, we've got pornography, masturbation, all of that stuff will affect how we show up in our marriage. And that is a huge issue that I think a lot of men are dealing with, struggling with, and is impacting their marriage. So let's come back and talk about that on the other side of this break. We are talking the psychology of sex with Brian Andrew on this week's Momentum. Encourage you to have a look around our website as we go to a short break, momentumaustralia.org. We will be back with Brian in just a moment.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Okay, well, welcome back to this week's show. It is part 2 of our conversation with Brian Andrew this week. We're talking the psychology of sex. And, Brian, I mean, let's launch straight back into the second part of the show, because I think this is an important part of this particular conversation to unpack. Let's talk about pornography, masturbation, guys' desire for sex, which, as you said, for all of us, we can attest to, like it's a lot stronger than most women, for the most part, not always, but for the most part. And guys can often struggle with that, and that can lead them into pornography, masturbation, that sort of thing. Let's start there. We are wired for release on a regular basis as a man. And, when we get married, we think that our our wife is going to fulfill all of that. And yet the truth is that's a tricky space to navigate. How do men listening right now who are in a marriage where they perhaps they're getting sex, but maybe not as often as they like or need, what do they do with that? What do they do with the fact that their body is just on this continual cycle of producing and needing relief and release?
Well, it's a big question, man. Such a big question. And again, without having professional qualifications, but having decades of experience, not only personally, but with hundreds and hundreds of couples, reading voraciously hundreds literally of books that often address this. I think I might have a few thoughts. I would say, first of all, I am not grey about the benefits of pornography. I'm totally opposed to it. I predict that sometime in the future it will become criminalised because it's not just the people who watch it, it's the backstory of those who produce it, and the staggering amount of pornography online. It's very sad, I think. Look, it's had an incredibly negative effect on possibly we're now in the second generation, I guess, of men who are affected by, and to a lesser degree, but some degree, women. I think, I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you guys in the past, but I would call it any involvement of pornography swamp sex, rather than crystal spring-fed water sex. There's a purity. When I was a little guy, I used to go fishing, and I went and put my bike against a tree, had to walk across 2 paddocks, cow paddocks, to get to the river. The second paddock, in a big part of the corner, there was a swamp, and the cows would go into that to drink water, and they would pee and poo in that swamp, and it was toxic. It was filled with bacteria, and I would liken sex that involved pornography to swamp sex, and healthy sex more like the beautiful river that was 10 minutes away where my 3 brothers and I learned to swim. And it was a stream that you could see right through to the bottom. You could see little minnows, even little trout. And we swam in that. We never got eye infections or ear infections or diarrhea. And I think ideally God wants us to have crystal clear spring sex, which is not encumbered with the dynamic of pornography. So I'm very strongly against it. Of course, I'm a male, so I'm aware of the powerful temptation of it. And I think of the addictions, pornography is one of the most difficult to break. If you get started, I'll just have a little look. It's like there's a little toe hold there, and if you watch a bit more, it's a foothold, and if you watch a bit more, it's a stronghold. And once you get to the addiction phase, you need professional help. You just do. And there's people around who specialize in that area. I think it's a pity more churches don't. Do you remember that course called Valiant Man that Alan Meyer wrote? We found in one of the churches I was in that our men found that the most helpful course they'd ever done to overcome pornography. So there are resources out there, but you're probably going to need some help if you're kind of addicted.
Brian, let's paint another scenario. Let's say that guys are in a marriage that there's not pornography in play, but they're perhaps not getting sex as much as they would like, so they can tend towards masturbation. Or they're in a marriage where the sex is completely dried up and it's just masturbation now to relief. What are your thoughts upon that or around that?
Yeah, again, I'm staggered. We've done marriage seminars for a long time, and sometimes to help with not being embarrassing, we might put a little box off to the side, or these days, in more modern ways, to have a phone number that they can send a text through. What staggers me is the number of marriages where they don't really have sex at all, and they're both okay with that. And I've talked to couples like that, and I'm like, well, I don't think it's healthy. But then you go back beyond the symptom to the why. And as I said earlier, there are some men who've often seen things on the screen or in a book or whatever, a movie, and they want their wife to do this. And it's not something she wants to do, you know. And I say, look, I think the whole area, for example, of oral sex, the Bible doesn't specifically talk about that. But the issue is, I think, with a couple who are committed in a covenant of marriage, that it should be your sexual experience. It should be something you both agree with, you know. And if you want to try something a bit different, I was doing a camp once and they asked if I would do an extra session on sex just for couples only. I said, sure, Northern New South Wales. So I didn't realise till after this was a setup. But one of the guys, a farmer, puts his hand up. What do you think about oral sex? In front of about 60, 80 people or whatever. And I said, well, I think if you just enjoy talking about it, that's really quite sweet. And half of them laughed like you guys are laughing, and the other half had no clue what I was talking about. And I went on to say it's about mutual agreement. And if there's a mutual agreement for certain sexual expression, well, that's fine.
Some final thoughts, Brian, because we are running out of time. I mean, what seems to be a common thread is that this is something that's not talked about well, maybe at all in church, well in marriages between couples. And there will be people listening, and quite a few, probably on a higher percentage than not, that are not having a good sex life or a fulfilling sex life in their marriage, right? Let's be honest. Let's speak into that space for the last few minutes. Whether it's male, female, again, how do we get this thing back on track? How do we even start that conversation and start repairing breaches to then potentially having a great sex life back in our marriage?
Really is a tender area, isn't it? And I think one of the biggest things is getting a joint agreement, like, hey, we need to work at this together, preferably if the other person isn't willing. And I mean, there's books around like Laugh Your Way to a Happy Marriage, which is very explicit in places. And he's also, I can't remember that guy's name, but
Mark Gungor, I think his name is.
I would suggest finding a guy like that and watching it together in your own home, you know, watching and then talking about it. And I think there would likely be tears, confusion, sometimes from a guy. I had no idea you felt like that. You know, we tend to lack awareness at times. And certainly, you know, there are people around who are professionally trained. They call themselves sexologists. And there's a few Christians around as well, you know, that you might get a session with them and maybe on your own, but then as a couple, at a certain point, it really needs to be the couple to understand each other. And I think one of you touched earlier too on the fact that the sexual desire is not always the same level in a couple. In fact, often it's not the same level at all. And so one of the couple might think, I hardly ever have sex at all. And the other thinks, we're always having sex. It's too much. Mm. And this is, you know, sometimes you're listening to this couple and you're thinking, well, they're not on the same page at all, but it's their perception, their experience. And certainly it's an area where there can be a lot of pain that needs healing. Women feeling objectified, men feeling that she's not willing to give herself often enough. Communication is so important. And it is difficult. More generally, to communicate well for a man is more difficult than a woman. And I think the woman needs to be patient. But that communication thing, we've all just got to keep on growing.
Yeah. Brian, you mentioned in a conversation off air, and maybe we'll finish with this, that everything essential about a person is not visible. And when you mentioned that, I wrote it down because I think that's so huge. And I think that if you can remember that in your marriage, everything essential about a person is not visible. What's happening for this person that you've married? If we can get into a conversation and go, what's actually happening for you here? Can we talk about that? Hold space and do that maturely and actually get to the crux of what's happening. It's a good starting point. It's a difficult place, but it's a good starting point. You can find more details and resources at livehappytogether.com.au, livehappytogether.com.au. That's Brian Andrews' website. Lots of stuff on there. And we've got some stuff on momentumaustralia.org as well that you can check out around this topic. The psychology of sex has been our show this week. What a great topic. What a powerful topic. Brian, thank you for speaking to that space so honestly, openly, vulnerably, truthfully, and without making it feel uncomfortable. In fact, it was quite a joy. Lots more in that, and encourage the guys to go back and have a listen. But thanks for your time again on Momentum.
Hey, thanks, Tim and Des, and to all your listeners. It's a pleasure and an honour to be able to share a little bit of our journey and the wisdom we might have picked up along the way.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.